We get it going. Here we go. Good evening, everyone. We're having a little technical difficulties. A few issues here. We're going to try one last screen share to see if we cannot get the intro to go. All right, we're just going to forego the intro because it's not working. So, and it refuses to work. And once again, it's a Google problem because it's their product that keeps crashing on me. All right, so welcome. Glad you can make it. Hopefully we're able to stay on throughout the night. So we're going to a couple things before we start, and I'll cover it again when we have more viewers a little later. But we've got at least three people in the church that's been around for quite a while. Lois Chapman, Mary Hunley, and Don Portman are all in pretty bad shape. So if you want to keep them in the prayers and put them in the prayer list for your location, that would be wonderful at your church tomorrow. So also we're going to we're just going to jump right into Dr. Rick's joke, and then we'll start out from there.
Okay, this story is called It's All About Adam and Eve. Wandering dejectedly through the Garden of Eden, nibbling on an apple, Eve was lonely and tired and bored, and she said, God, I'm lonely. God said, well, I'll create a man for you. Eve said, a man? What's a man? What's that? God said, well, a man is a creature with aggressive tendencies, enormous ego. He won't listen very well. He'll get lost easily but never stop and ask for directions. However, he's big, strong, can open jars, hunt animals, and he can be a lot of fun to be with. He said, sounds great. Oh, one more thing, God said. Heal I made first. Now, the guys are a little stunned at that joke, right?
Well, we had a little fear. You hit that punchline again for us.
Oh, the punchline again.
Yeah, hit it again.
Oh, and one more thing, God said to Eve. He will want to believe that I made him first.
Oh, no. It's
being a comedian is not as easy as it looks. One more
you
joke.
make it look like anybody could do it. You make it look so easy.
A 5-year-old boy was at church with his parents, witnessing a wedding of a family friend for the first time, a big wedding. He said, Mommy, why do all the ladies in the bride's party have on white? His mother whispered and said, because she and the others are very happy to be getting married. That's why she's wearing white. She's so happy to be getting married. The little boy thought for a moment and then looked at the groomsmen and said, well, why are the men all wearing black?
The other night at my place, I was teasing one of my teenage girls, and we pick at each other back and forth. And she said something about Jesus or whatever. So, well, Jesus was a man, therefore I look like the man that saved everybody. And she goes, well, I'll give you that. And I said, and you're a woman, and Eve was a woman. She's the one that messed it up for everybody.
Uh, well, this kind of relates to men and women in a way. On the world events, this may be more of a moral thing. You know, the video came out showing that Planned Parenthood is negotiating for selling body parts of fetuses, which apparently is not legal or moral. The question is, I have a feeling that the devil, that's one of the things he loves the most, is aborting human life, killing the father's babies. He loves it. So I believe, in spite of the furor, the devil will defend the abortion industry. They won't lose funding. Nothing happened to them. Now, I could be wrong. And I'd like for people who are in the chat room, or will be arriving in the chat room shortly, to maybe you could respond. Am I correct that the devil will protect the abortion industry? Or will the American people in righteous indignation rise up and defund them?
Well, someone seems to think that video, the people who videoed it, have more video, and the video they have is of actual procedures, and they're trying to stop them from releasing that video, and that's why they're going after them. They don't want the American public to see how brutal and how big of an abomination this is, and they're going to do everything they can to stop that. So yeah, that's a good question. I think he will do everything, you know, obviously to protect. It's the Eucharist of the women's movement.
That wasn't such a good idea.
It's kind of, yeah, it's a little distracting. Yeah, the abortion is the Eucharist of the women's movement. So they don't want to give that up.
You can mute his mic.
Yeah, I know. Mute your mic, Gary. Go up and mute your mic.
9 o'clock's running late.
Oh, well. Probably the devil is, they're probably going to put the hammer down to prevent them from releasing the last one. The other event that I think is meaningful has to do with Israel, Iran. I hope I understand this correctly, but John Kerry said to the U.S. Senate, and he said this in a previous speech, he said it's fantasy for us to expect the Iranians to surrender. That means giving up their support for terrorism and for their desire for the public destruction of Israel. It's fantasy to ask them to do that. I thought, wow, that kind of amazes me that we can't ask them to do that. And so the question is, when will everybody know it's a bad deal? Like in the case of Chamberlain, we know, actually history gave us additional facts. The generals are going to get rid of Hitler if the British and French had stood up two times. So according to Churchill, World War II was preventable. But that not being the case, the point is, they knew that the Chamberlain deal was bad when Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia and I think the onslaught to Austria, maybe a few other minor things. But, you know, when his troops rolled into neighboring countries, they knew immediately that peace in our time white paper that Chamberlain made, the appeasement, was a mistake. So the question is, will we know without any doubt this appeasing of Iran is a mistake?
Absolutely. Adolf Hitler was asked about that paper, and his answer was, "What? It's a paper." And in Islam, they don't have to honor any agreement they make with non-Islamic people, so they can say anything they want to us. I think it's called tika, something like that, and sign anything and whatever, and it's not binding in their eyes and their world. So they don't feel they've done anything wrong. I read tonight that don't quote me on this, but it seems like along with this deal, we've given $150 billion and more arms that they can use, and some of they're talking about funneling that money into Hamas.
Yeah, they can buy arms from any arms dealer in the world. A lot of countries want the business and the money. I mean, like Russia, China, and some European countries, and probably some smaller ones want. But also, in a few years, they can buy the best ballistic missiles. That means missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles. That was a last-minute sweetener that Iran demanded, and our government rolled over and gave to them. I'm thinking, what in the world? But here's how we will know. I heard one guy on the radio say that. How will we know when it's a bad deal without any doubts? As in Hitler's case, it was the invasion of neighbors. When there's an atomic bomb race in the Middle East, and a city like Tel Aviv has been A-bombed, or New York City has been A-bombed.
Well, that or when Netanyahu figures out an atomic bomb is imminent, and he goes over there and tries to take it out, and our fighter jets go over and take his planes down, because in the agreement we signed, we have agreed to defend Iran against Israel.
And Netanyahu said he will guarantee that they're never going to get a bomb. So this is a mess.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
We're going to defend our former friend, or our former enemy from our former, which it is former now, friend, our former ally.
You know,
what a mess.
Obama said, I've done something nobody else has ever been able to do. And Donald Trump says, right, because it's stupid.
Just armed our enemy. I heard this it's on the internet somewhere. Some senators said, well, what about during the end of the negotiations, even currently, they have these chants where they have hundreds of people, a lot of women too, chanting, death to Israel, death to America, death to America. And John Kerry said, oh, that's just silliness. We just can ignore it.
I'm hearing it so much, I'm learning how to say it.
You know, the funny thing about all that is, when Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf and some other speeches that if war came to Europe, this would be the end of European Jewry, people thought, well, that's just political bluster. That's just, you know, silliness. But obviously he didn't succeed because God wouldn't allow it, but he sure tried. So the idea that these weird dictators don't mean the evil things they say, I don't know about that.
The problem with this is biblical. I mean, this is obvious when you know your Bible.
Don't you think that Tom Kerry is Tom Kerry or John Kerry, if I got them mixed up here? Anyway, don't you think he's out there running a fear program? He's like the high pressure salesman that's saying, if you don't buy this right now, the price is going up tomorrow.
Yeah, he says
he doesn't want to give anybody any time to look it over, consider it, or understand what's in it. You got to do it right now, or else something bad, really bad, is going to happen.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I think they're going to go straight to the UN, and they're going to go around Congress anyway. I think that's what his intention is.
And they've already done that.
Yeah.
Bob, did you know that he told the president, told Congress, that he'd go to Congress first in the UN. They already went to the UN before they went to Congress, making the People's Congress and our votes somewhat marginalized.
I don't know how true this is. Somebody told me, so I'm just going to quote on. I have no clue if it's true or not. But apparently, Kerry's daughter is married to a Iranian prince of some kind, and that's helped him become more open to this. Is what a guy came in my shop and told me the other day. So take it for that. Some dude came in my shop and said that.
Well,
it's about as reliable as half the stuff you read on the internet, and more reliable than anything you see on MSN and CNN or MSNBC. That's it. Yeah, it's more reliable than anything you get from them.
One thing we do know about John Kerry, for a fact, he gave great propaganda to the communists during the Vietnam War. After the West left and the communists won, they killed in Indochina 4.5 million people. So he's betrayed our allies before toward disastrous results. Now, I'm not saying all the blame is John Kerry's. I'm quite aware of this. A lot of people involved, Jane Fonda, a lot of the U.S. media, as you can read in the article that's in the 21st Century Watch. But John Kerry had his part in it. So he's doing the same thing he did before.
Yeah, the leopard doesn't change their spots. I remember being a kid watching him, and I was real young, and I thought, boy, this, if you open a package of chicken and you smell something, you don't eat it. Boy, something smelled every time I saw that guy.
Who? Kerry?
Kerry, yeah.
Oh, I'm John Kerry. You Mr. What's that guy's name from Gilligan's Island? Howell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is Mr. Howell. I'm John Kerry. I'm smart and you're not.
Yeah,
he's doing all right.
I got a customer comes in, he calls him horse face.
By the way, the one thing you're right about him being a salesman, high pressure, he's not saying, either you buy the deal or there's war. No, we could have left Iran and that they have been in for 20-some years. That is, isolated from the rest of the world and economically crippled. Why change anything unless they're willing to give up terrorism and destruction of Israel and America as their goals? But why just leave them the way they were before?
And for Americans.
Crippled and isolated.
Yeah, for Americans, like you said. Hey, we just had, they were in the chat room. We got there's a post in there, a article. I can't get into reading it, but just the headline says Iran eyes up 185 billion oil and gas, $185 billion oil and gas projects after sanctions. So add that to what we're paying them.
It's true, right?
Yeah, this was this is I've got the article up right now.
We just found
Yep.
Well, they say the price of gas is going to go down to $2, and of course they're going to claim that that's one of the early benefits of this agreement with Iran.
Yeah, $2 gas and a big hole somewhere in this country or in the Middle East.
Yeah, another hole in the world.
Well, one thing to consider is that we looked up the article. John Kerry's family does have a marriage relationship with an Iranian. He's some kind of Iranian doctor. So that part is true. Now, how much it influenced him, we don't know. But that part is true.
And to Valerie Jarrett and
Isn't there a name for that when you got a relative?
One thing that has occurred to me that as America turns its back on Israel and leaves Israel, and John Kerry also said this, that if Israel dare try to attack Iran, it would help defend Iran, but certainly it would be an absolute disaster for Israel if they dared try to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. So if the Jews have lost their number one sponsor, etc., they may have to turn to God, and that means they may have to start really thinking about rebuilding the temple.
Yeah, that's a good point. It looked pretty obvious before this mess that they might end up there with, wanting to rebuild the temple, but after this agreement it even looks more likely that they're going to have no other choice but to turn to that, because if the whole world's against them, I mean, that's typically what's happened to Israel over the years, over the centuries. When the whole world's finally against them, at one point they start turning back to God, and for them that would be building a temple.
I mean, millions of European Jews would not have gone to Israel to migrate after World War II, except Hitler so uprooted them and all the bad stuff he did. But you could argue if it weren't for the Nazis, Israel would be just a small settlement of maybe 150, 200,000 Jews in the Middle East. Millions of Jews would not have gone except the horrors of World War II. So it might take something bad to get them to build a temple. Not that I want that to happen. I'm just saying you could say that pattern exists.
Right. And we face it, when Israel has to turn to Saudi Arabia and consider them an ally against Iran, something's really out of whack here. Something's really broke in the world.
Yeah, I'm going to say this about the Israelis. Years ago, something happened, I believe, in Syria, and they had surrounded our embassy, and the Israelis were able to get in there, take our people out of that embassy, and leave them. When they finally broke down the walls and got in there, it was an empty place. They are a nation of cunning people, and so if they say they may not fly planes over to blow up the whatever. They may have some other way of walking in there and doing it.
Cyber attack, but we will see. Our topic for this week is Abraham, and I wanted to make a few general statements about Abraham that I think are important to understand clearly. Abraham is often taken to two extremes. One extreme is you take Abraham and you say, well, God made him become circumcised, and I'm sure Acts 15, the Judaizing party was trying to get the Christians to become just a sect within Judaism by keeping circumcision, and certainly most of the Jewish traditions and all their extra rules and laws and traditions and all that, the kind of things that Christ said in Matthew 11:28-30 was a yoke, and also in Matthew 23 was a yoke and a burden on the people. They wanted to do that, so they used Abraham as a justification, as Abraham was circumcised. The other extreme is they take Abraham and they say, well, look, he was saved by grace and faith, therefore the law was done away. Well, that isn't true either. It is true, though, Galatians 4:20, especially 4:22 to 5:4, Paul makes the analogy. He says, look, the Jewish way is to try to earn your own salvation through obeying the laws plus all these extra rules. Now, Paul does say in Galatians 6:12-13 that they don't really obey the law. They do it for selective laws and selective rules, but they're really not all that righteous. But the point is, the Judaizers wanted to make Christianity just a sect within Judaism, keeping circumcision and all the rules, which they knew would limit Gentile participation. Because most Gentiles, if you told them, we're going to have to cut your body before you can really join the church, they'd say, thank you, no thank you. And that was the whole point of it. They didn't want the truth shared too greatly with Gentiles. It was meant as a barrier. Well, obviously God didn't want that, and it made it clear in Acts 10 when uncircumcised, raw Gentile was given the Holy Spirit to Peter's shock. But you can look at Abraham, and if you take him out of context, you can say, well, look at Abraham. He didn't obey the law. He was saved by grace, and he was saved by grace. No doubt about it. But that does not mean that Abraham did not obey God, though he made some mistakes, of course. But I just want to make that point. And I think we can go to Genesis 17. There are many verses we could look at. I just want to look at a few, and then anybody can come up with any other verses they want. But if I'm getting the right one in my article, we got several in our, but I believe these are some of the best ones. Genesis 17, 1, and God is making a special covenant with Abraham. When Abraham was 99 years old, it's almost 100. God appeared to Abraham and said to him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless. Now that means you're supposed to walk the correct way. And blameless could also be interpreted a mature, balanced obedience to God. But either way, he's making a covenant and he's telling Abraham to obey him. And there's no way you can try to play games to get around that. And I've seen some translations do it. Let's go to Genesis 26, verse 5. Genesis 26:5, and the whole context is why God is blessing him, etc. And then he says, because, in verse 5, Genesis 26, because Abraham obeyed my voice. There are those who say, well, Abraham proves Italy. All you have to do is believe, and then you don't have to obey. Obey my voice, kept my charge, my commandments. I like that word, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. I think that covers everything. Now, you might argue with Moses. Of course, Moses wrote the book of Genesis right before the Israelites went to the Promised Land. And, of course, also wrote Leviticus and Deuteronomy, where the law is more, and Numbers is more elaborated, a little bit in Exodus too. But clearly, everybody knows what his commandments were. Abraham knew the basic commandments, and he obeyed them. And so the world tries to use Abraham in either extreme, either to say that you're saved by grace only, you don't have to try to obey God, or that you want to become Jewish and save yourself by extreme law keeping, though it's not balanced law keeping, but it's their version of it. That's wrong as well.
Well, they're still keeping it very physical. For some reason, we have the grace where we realize that we will fail, but all the physical things, not really all the physical things, because he still doesn't want us to do some things, but a lot of the physical laws are done away with. We don't have to, they don't tell us how to cut our hair or whatever, and we rely on God just being merciful and kind, where the Jews are still, 600, I think they're now up to 13 or 15 laws just about the Sabbath. Something came on the radio a couple of years ago, and they said that the Orthodox Jewish faith had added a few more laws. Things like picking your nose on the Sabbath is considered grooming, so that's not acceptable. There are minuscule little things like this that they put so much view on. I know down in South Florida, a lot of the Jewish-owned condominiums, you're not allowed to push the button because that's starting a fire. It can make a spark. So they just run non-stop on each floor, up and down, all from Friday night to Saturday. Their program, they just keep going. So when you get on that elevator, you're on the 30th floor, you got 30 stops to get there. Those things are way overlooked at, I think. And when you consider the name Israel means to struggle with God, and they don't accept Jesus Christ, who actually named Israel, and they struggle with that. It's just more proof, of the reality of the Bible.
And when Christ said that, my yoke is light and my burden is light, he meant in comparison to their religious leaders who put a burden on the Jewish people that was a yoke of bondage. And that's the kind of yoke of bondage that the Judaizing party was secretly or surreptitiously, I like that word, surreptitiously, when Paul left an area like Galatians, was trying to get them into. Now, this is not to say that you can lie and steal and cheat and murder. You obviously, by the way, if you looked at the Ten Commandments, there's, to my knowledge at least, there's not any church in the world that says all 10 are done away, because they see how ridiculous they are. There are only two that churches want to do away with. I wonder what two they are.
Yeah, I've had discussions with pastors of the churches of the world, and I ask them, is it okay that I use the name of God in vain, that I claim to be God? Is it okay if I build a statue of a cow or something in my yard? Certainly can't sleep with your wife, or kill somebody. And they go, no, but 10 Commandments are done away with, and it really comes down to graven images and the Sabbath. Everything else, I can't steal your lawnmower, So they pick and choose. And when you go to Matthew 5 and you go to James and you show them if you've broken the least of these, you've broken all of them, they look at you like you've got two heads.
The problem America's facing now is it's even worse than that. I realize mainstream Christianity won't face those two. But it's even now it's getting to the point where in public they don't want the word God bless America or God to even be uttered. John, would you share that experience that you had at the funeral recently with the audience? Is John able to hear us? His picture didn't move. Oh, there
It's
he is.
moving to me.
John, your mic isn't working. I don't know why, but it was working earlier. Well, we can keep going while he's getting that together.
Okay.
Sounds like he's got it back on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe John can tell us about the funeral.
Well, apparently he cannot hear us.
Yeah. John, can you hear us? Okay, we cannot hear you. For some reason, your mic is not working. I don't know what would cause that. Couldn't answer that. But what happened to he was at a funeral, and if he cuts on, he can cut in here. But he was at a funeral, and something's moving over there.
Well,
Go ahead and say
I
something,
hear it.
John. No, I can't hear him. Oh. Well, I don't know. I don't know why I would have quit working on you, but it was fine earlier. He was at a funeral, and he wanted to he wanted to have the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, your mic, is the mic muted? Your mic is muted. No, it's not. I don't know what it is. Anyway, he wanted to play the Pledge of Allegiance, and there was military in uniform, and the military in uniform are not allowed to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I think that's how it was. I mean, they're not allowed to recite it.
They can't salute it either.
They can't salute the flag, and they can't recite the Pledge of Allegiance while in uniform. That is a directive from the top down. That's where we've gotten to in this country. And you can see that in Israel. Israel as a nation has gone through, when they get to a certain point and they start thinking that when they regress into taking away, they start, I can't think of the word, but anyway, the military can't do it, and that's where we're at today. Well, something's working over there, John, because you just try saying something.
Hello?
There you go. You got it fixed.
Good.
Why don't you tell it better than I did?
Okay, I'm right on. Okay. Anyway, I was at a funeral. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I was at a funeral today, and I was officiating it, and I was going to start out with the Pledge of Allegiance from the people at the cemetery, and the command sergeant major from the honor guard detail told me, he said, when you get to this part where you ask everyone to stand, and when you ask active duty military or veterans of our military service to render the proper hand salute, he said, leave off the part at the start which says all active duty military render the proper hand salute. We had a directive come down some time back. He said about 3 years, but I guess it's been about 6 actually, from research earlier, that prohibits us from, if we're in uniform, active duty in uniform, prohibits us from saluting the flag and pledging the allegiance, during the Pledge of Allegiance. And I looked at him and I said, you are kidding me. He said, no, I am not. That is, we are under that protocol. That is a directive from the top. And so we did the Pledge of Allegiance to those there were about 150 people there. And we did the Pledge of Allegiance ourselves. The military, honor guard, all the military stood at straight ramrod attention, but they could not salute nor recite the pledge. I could not believe it, but it's just something else underhand to cut down the love of this country. And we were talking earlier, and I was talking to my wife earlier. She said it's probably because of the phrase "under God" that they took it out. So that was an experience I had today. It's very unnerving. Made me mad as all get out. Because as an Air Force veteran, I rile against that to no end. This was in honor of a man, 18 years veteran, who died of cancer. And Bronze Star, 3 tours in Iraq. He deserves honor. And
We've come full circle. When I was in the service, if you didn't salute the flag, they would lock your heels.
Yeah, that was then. That's when you and I read. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we've lost our way so much that they're doing away with terms like husband and wife and doing away with gender. When you look in the mirror, you don't know if you're a boy or a girl. You're pretty confused. But it's probably okay if I go, oh, this is my bitch, or this is my hoe. That's okay, because it's so devaluing and disgusting and against what God would want you to think of your wife. It seems that Scripture says everything that is evil they shall call good, and everything that is good they shall call evil. So when you go, this is my husband, this is my wife, those are beautiful terms of a family, and they're doing away with that. This nation.
Is there anybody want to argue the fact that we haven't arrived there yet? Good is evil and evil is good. I think we're there. We have arrived at least there, and I think we're a little further down the road than that. There's no doubt about it. And probably in the last 10 years, that's been more and more obvious every day. We have arrived there.
This homosexual marriage thing that they just passed is putting your finger and flipping God's nose. I don't know if I've said this on here or not. There's a video going around of Tom DeLay. It's called Tom DeLay and the 12 Perversions. And he says he's held paperwork where they're doing away with incest, they're doing away with bestiality, they're doing away with pedophilia. Everything is going to be legal.
Yep, anything goes.
And if you look that up, Tom DeLay's 12 Perversions, it could be doctored, I don't know, but somebody sent it to me and I looked it up on YouTube and it was there.
I was told that chaplains are not allowed to use the word Jesus Christ, even for Christians, in their official whatever. And I thought, wow, why have a chaplain? You have to use some general term.
Someone told
That's kind of where they want us to go. They want to have, and if you notice, all these attacks, we're kind of getting off topic again, but all these attacks are only against Christianity.
Going back to Abraham.
They're not against Muslims. They're not against any other religion on the face of the earth. They are only against Christianity, and even though it's nominal, it's blatant and it's obvious, and nobody seems to see it.
The only thing that should shock us is how fast this is coming on. Because Satan's stated goal, he stated it, he said it, I will be as the Most High. He wants to replace God with himself.
What's going on right now is Saddam Hussein.
Is how fast it's coming at us.
What's going on right now is Saddam Hussein, when he knew that he'd lost, started burning everything. And that's where Satan is right now. He's going to destroy everything as fast as he can. And we've got a Congress and a White House that's is either pushing it through or just stepping out of the way and letting it ride.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's because of Jesus Christ and because we are the descendants of Abraham. The promises made to Abraham, the blessings of this nation in Great Britain.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which brings me back to the thought of chapter 26, verse 5. What separates us from everyone else in the world, and that is the fact that we understand and know God's law and we keep it. And that's going to become very critical to us in the days ahead, because I expect any day now, as we preach this, the Romans 1:28 and so on, I expect any day the deputy of the Sacramento County Sheriff to come knocking on the door, and you might as well too, because it's coming. But my question is here in verse 5 of chapter 26, it says, because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws, where did he get them? Where did he learn them? Somebody tell me that?
Probably directly from God himself.
That,
By the way, Go ahead.
I was going to say
Go ahead.
that remember, Abraham lived in that time, and he lived among many of the contemporaries that we read ahead before him. Now, how long did Noah live? How many did some of these men live? 500, 600, 700 years. Some were contemporaries. They taught. Those stories were handed down from the flood. They knew God, who God was, in a more family-oriented way of passing these laws down. And Abraham obviously not just was given by God directly, but there was a reason, because God says, you go and I'll show. You know, that you get out of here and go, and then I'll show you where you're going. Today we want God to show us, then we'll go. That's just backwards. That's why he's the father of the faithful, because God said, you go, and I'll show you when, you know, as you're going down the road. And I think if we would do that in the work of God today, with more faith, God may open up more avenues to preach the actual everlasting gospel here at the last gasp before it's shut off and a great famine becomes upon the land. Those are my thoughts, and I'm open to anybody else.
Also, Abraham experienced a kind of a foretaste of what God the Father was going to experience with his son being crucified, where he had to walk him out, however the distance was, to build this altar, to sacrifice his only begotten son, who he loved and wanted more than anything. God wanted to prove Abraham's faith. It was so strong, and he did. I don't think God put anything on Abraham could not do. And his faith was so strong, he says, if God promised me, you're my only son, he said, I'll be the father of many nations and peoples, and my seed will be like the seed of the sand at the beach. He had faith that there was a way out of this, or somehow just something, you know, he just knew that God was not going to lie to him and back off. And you know, a lot of people come to me and they go, I'm scared to death. God's not lying to us today either. Our fear is in our lack of faith. So we should look to Abraham for that.
That he had godly character when he did that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
the pain, I have a son, and I'll tell you the pain of having to do that. It's just I couldn't imagine.
Yep. In other words, Abraham and Isaac did or experienced similar to what God the Father and Jesus Christ did, exactly. And probably in the very same location. At least that's what the scholars think, or very close to the very same place. So he's the father of the faith. God let him experience it and test him to the limit, and he passed. I also thought what John was saying was very interesting too, about moving. You know, think about it. Abraham was very successful, hundreds of workers, servants, or employees, and that was the center of the world. The Middle East, where he was at the time. I guess it's now Iraq, but he told him to leave. A nice area. It was nice then, and his success, and move to a foreign land. How would you like God told you to do that? And people say, well, Abraham, got everything just because he had faith, but that's quite a bit of obedience.
I'd probably be okay with that if I were Mexican.
And they told
I say in about 5 years we move down there, they'll all be gone anyway. So
they tell you go to paradise, Oklahoma. No.
Well, isn't this Christian walk, in this Christian life to the kingdom of God, a walk? Don't we walk all the way through? It wasn't Abraham. God told him to go, and what did he do? He packed up his bags and he walked down the road. And God showed him where to go. Then when he got down there with his nephew, Lot, then Lot chose, he gave him a choice of the best lands, and Lot said, okay, I'll take the best lands, and you take this old dirt ravine over here and desert. And Abraham, okay, God will make something out of that. So as he walked through at building this continual faith in the promises of God, he knew God had promised, he would keep him going. He kept building godly character and increased his faith until look what he is, father of the faithful, and You couldn't find him today if you had to, because he molded away many, many moons ago into the dust. But
Well,
someday he's got to come out of that dust all eternal. And
he didn't hesitate to step out on faith.
exactly.
Sometimes that can be difficult. We all have to step out on faith at one time or another, but sometimes you can be very apprehensive about it.
That reminds me of so many times. How many of you, and how many in the audience are thinking about it, how many times have you gone to the Feast of Tabernacles knowing you might not have or did not have a job when you got back?
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe you didn't have the money to get back.
Didn't have the money to get, but mostly it was, I'm going to the feast, I need the time off, and the boss says, no, you can't have it. Well, I'm going anyway.
I had a family member fire me for keeping the feast.
I don't know what.
Wow, that's pretty bad.
She could get today.
Up at the feast, and I believe this was at the Branson feast, and that came there on faith and simply did not have the money to get back home. They had the money to get there, so they came. They got there broke. Now, of course, we all chipped in and got them back home. But they didn't know that until they got there.
85, I came down here for the feast in St. Pete from Virginia, and I had the banks weren't in sync back then like they are now, and I could get $10 out for gas. So I'd hit the bank, I'd pull $10 out, put it in the car. I would drive until it ran out, but I'd be in a new county or something, and I could get $10 there until I got back. And I did that all the way back to Virginia from St. Pete. When I got back, I was like 60 or 80 bucks overdrawn, but I got paid the day before I got back, and I had nothing bounced.
That's faith, right? You know, there's one more thing about Abraham that we could mention. Abraham had a personal, close connection to God. He was able to intervene for Sodom and Gomorrah, say, well, wait a minute, God, you don't want to destroy, what if there's 50 people, 40, 30, 20? Got God all the way down to 10 to save his nephew Lot, and still got his nephew Lot saved. But he was able to bargain with God and even laugh at some of the things God said because he had a really close relationship with God. And, you know, men like Moses did, but a lot of people can't really say they have that close relationship with God like Abraham. But it's a great example for us to shoot for.
To have God know you, and you to have the ability to speak with him and know for whatever reason he singled you out of the entire planet. In a lot of ways, I hope people in the church realize that that's exactly what has happened with us, because we are not like the churches of the rest of the world. And to know that he knows you by name, even though he hasn't spoken to me directly where I hear his voice, he does speak to us through his Bible and through conversation with other people in the church and that kind of thing, and through sermons. To know that he has set you apart is, for me, that's huge. It's huge. So imagine he set you apart so much that he talked, he knew everything about you, and enough so that he knew your generations to come before they were born. He was a really amazing, special man.
But of course, he wasn't a perfect man because God told him to go and he'd show, so he went. And about the first thing he did, started lying about his wife being his sister.
Yeah.
So he had his own personal sins to deal with.
Well, Hagar.
Hagar. Don't even go there in that story, okay?
Yeah, really. We're still paying for that one.
I think that there are 100% of the women in the Church of God who are waiting for the resurrection to eternal life to stand in front of Jesus Christ and say, how come that? How come you let him get away with that one? So, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was Abraham, and he, of course, had to repent down the line to maintain that close relationship with God. God told him when he sacrificed Isaac, before he brought in the deer, then he told him, he said, now I know that you'll obey.
Because he knew how much Abraham loved his son. Because he had that love for his son.
So at what point does God in our dealings come and say to us, to himself, now I know that you'll obey me? Seems to be, I'm just saying it, that a lot of shaking out has occurred in the Church of God over the last several years, and it appears to me that God knows who will keep his word and keep his laws and obey him, and it gets a little smaller all the time, but hopefully God will give us the means to reach out now, like you're trying to do here, and in other ways to reach the world with the truth of God once he has us knowing that we're not this time going to fall apart and desert and do what the others did. And that's what I think.
I know quite a few of the people in ICG, and that hard-headedness, I can see that quite a bit in our people. So I don't see us falling away the way maybe some others that were in the original church or whatever maybe have done at this point. But I see that, and by the way, it's good to be a stiff-necked Jew if you're stiff-necked on the right side of things. If you're stiff-necked and won't break and for the name of Jesus Christ, and you're stiff-necked and you won't break on the holy days, the Sabbath, and the truth, and right and wrong. And I think that's another story if you take a look at Abraham's sons. When you consider Jacob wrestled with God, and how hard-headed he was, and he wouldn't break. That's an amazing, wonderful personality to have on the right side of things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely a characteristic that, like you said, on the right, as long as it's on the right side of things, it's good to have. It's just hard to get that hard-headedness to come over to the right side. Usually, that's what keeps it from making that leap.
Right. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say I like in Hebrews 11 that Abraham is there, the father of the faith, in the faith chapter. And lo and behold, at the very end, we're actually lumped in with him. That they without him would not be made or perfected. I have to look it up the exact word. But there we are in the very end, right along with that hall of heroes. And boy, that's very encouraging to me.
What I've always thought is we will not have to be introduced to these people. I think that when God changes us, we'll look over and go, that's Moses, that's Jacob, that's Matthew, that's Mark. We will know them by name, and they will know us as well. I think.
One more thing that dawns me about Abraham that I think God was proud of. When Abraham intervened to save his nephew Lot in Sodom, he was praying to save others. The end of the book of James, it says, if you pray and intervene and you save a sinner from falling away, you've done a wonderful thing. And I was thinking, if we see someone that's falling away and we pray for them and maybe encourage them to, like steering somebody from going off a bridge. I know you can't force people to not go off a bridge, but sometimes one person encouraging them can make a difference. And if you could do that and pray for somebody and save them from backsliding, that's a wonderful thing. And that's what Abraham was trying to do. And that is a wonderful thing.
And he was praying for really evil people that didn't care about him at all or anybody else. Very, very narcissistic and probably violent people. And he was going to God on their behalf. They didn't even know he was going on their behalf. He just didn't. He knew God, and he knew when God said, I'm going to destroy this, I'm going to utterly destroy it, I believe is how it was written. He knew what that meant, and he did everything he could so that, who knows how big Sodom and Gomorrah was, 10,000 people, 100,000, I don't know. I have no way of knowing. But he knew that there was going to be terrible death and destruction, and he did everything he could to barter with God to save their lives.
By the way, you all know that Sodom and Gomorrah got in war with some other kings in the same general Jordan Valley area, and they were taken prisoner, and Abraham with 300 men who are, I guess, battle ready or capable, and 2 local allies that camped near him. He formed an army and rescued Sodom and Gomorrah, and I'm sure he did it for Lot's sake, because Lot was also a prisoner too, and rescued them, and then he gave a tenth of the loot that they captured. He tithed to God, showing that he knew another Bible principle, tithing. Which, Paul uses that to show, hey, there's something greater than Levitical priesthood. They didn't even exist on the days of Abraham, and you are following Abraham when you become a Christian. We're in the bosom of Abraham, as that famous song used to go.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you all remember that song, don't you? No. The bosom of Abraham. Okay, at least somebody remembers it. And let's say hi to Carolyn and Bill, and pray for Carolyn. I know she's making great progress overcoming cancer.
Yep, and again, just to make mention, Lois Chapman, Mary Hunley, and Don Portman all could use prayers. So,
did I give you an update on Fred Craigwick?
No, you did not.
He, of course, is still a paraplegic, and he was going to dialysis 3 days a week. He now, for 2 weeks, he does not have to take dialysis anymore.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yay, that's wonderful.
That is amazing.
Amazing. You talk about improved spirit. I know you're running out of time, so I'll hush. But I just wanted to give you another.
That's fine. No, we have all the time we want, actually, but we do try to keep it. We try to keep the listeners from falling asleep while for some of it, it's pushing 10 o'clock. All right, what else did we want to add before
By
we
the way,
go, gentlemen?
next week.
Huh?
Next week?
Next week we do the 6th commandment. That's thou shalt not murder, right?
Yep.
And one thing that I know we all must sense, violence, even in a nice place like America, is in a sharp uptick the last couple of months.
Yeah. It seems to be not a big, there's a lot less apprehension to commit murder nowadays. People don't value life. I mean, we've been telling these people since they were children that it's just a sheer miracle that your mother didn't abort you, or you're just a piece of fetal tissue, as that we keep hearing in the news, and that life is not valued. So if we don't value life, why should they value life? To them, people in their minds know that these babies that are being aborted are lives. They are living human beings. And in their mind, if they know that, then to them, no different taking it then than taking it 20 years, 30 years, 50 years later. We've just done this to our society's done it to itself.
Well, what's next? The elderly, the sickly?
Yes, that's what's next. You're right. That is what's next.
That is in the health care bill. Well, they'll call it a rationing or budgeting. People that aren't worth the money to spend on. But I think Palin called it the death panel. But you get the general idea. Euthanasia is big in Europe.
People laughed at Sarah Palin for that, and she was absolutely right. And they're now doing. Oh, I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it's called end-of-life counseling. Mm-hmm. They're doing this. They're doing it now. End-of-life counseling. I don't want end-of-life counseling. I want surgery. I want keep me going, man.
You have to live with 3 more measly years lives. Take this nice little cocktail with barbiturates in it and go to happy.
Somebody
remember that? Not really funny, but isn't that what life counseling really is?
Oh yeah. Every time I hear about this, I think of the scene from Soylent Green when the old man is laying on the table and they're playing that I don't even know who it is anymore. I know it's Beethoven or what have you. And the deers are playing in the field, and he's taking his cocktail, and he's about to die. That's every time I hear about this. That's what enters my mind. So much of what we've seen in the movies over the years are starting to come true, believe it or not, and it's not a good thing.
There was
lawsuits said that they are going to take up where Dr. Kevorkian left off.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Twilight Zone with Burgess Meredith called The Obsolete Man.
Yep.
And he goes before a panel, and they tell him he's obsolete. And they ask him for one last request, and he says he wants to be blown up in his house, and he wants to talk to the guy that made the decision. And so the guy came to his house, and he had changed the locks on the doors so they couldn't get out. And he says, what do you want? And he says, I want you here with me. And he tried to get out, and he couldn't get. He was in absolute panic, and the house blew up. Really good program, but it tells you what's going on where we are.
What he does is he tells the guy from the state that says he was obsolete, or he stops by to see. He didn't tell him what. I'll try to make this short. He didn't tell him what method he picked to die. The guy shows up and he's lecturing him how. I mean, you could see this happening today in real life. That's how bad this is. And he's lecturing how the state does not fear, and how the state this and the state that. As soon as the guy tells him that he's picked his method of execution as a bomb, the guy's crawling for the door and crying like a sniveling little weasel. And then the next thing you see is, when he gets out, he lets him out. The next scene you see is he's standing before the state. This guy is that made the decision, and they're telling him now that he has been seen as a sniveling little weasel, that he is now obsolete. Mm-hmm. That's how it is. It is brilliant. And, real quick before we go, I want to say that, you know what? All these people that they are using as willful idiots right now, these useful idiots, I guess, those people are going to get turned on when this goes down. They're going to, the exact same thing Hitler used them. Hitler used the brown shirts, turned on them, and had them all murdered. And they're going to do the same thing with the people that are out there in the field for them, supporting them. Once these people figure out, and they're starting to wake up a little bit by bit, that they've been had, they're not on their side. They're only using them to gain more power and more money and more control of the world. And as soon as they've fully figured this out, they're going to turn on them.
Well, they were asking voters. I think we may have talked about this before. They were showing houses, who lives in this house and who lives in. And
we talked. Yeah.
Did we? So yeah, they're so ill informed. It's and they vote. I asked him why. He says because everybody did.
I think we have what Joshua did when he signed off. We're talking about the law of God and Abraham and being like Abraham. He said, every man in Israel did that which was right in his own eyes, He said, but for me and my house, let's try to be like Abraham, and we will follow the Lord.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody listening should know that, and obviously anybody else in the church should know that. I have that verse hanging in my house. As for me and mine, we will serve the Lord. But yeah, we definitely got some interesting times coming. Someone's asked me to repeat the names I gave earlier. It was Lois Chapman, it was Don Poorman, and it was Mary Hunley. But all three I know, they're very dear to me. I've known them for a very long time, and it's just they're all in pretty rough shape right now with one medical issue or another. So if you could keep me in your prayer list. So. If we have nothing else to add, gentlemen, again, next week's Sixth Commandment, and whatever kind of crazy news comes out, we know we'll probably be inundated with it, as we seem to be every week now. I'm not going to try and play the ending this week because I don't want to crash the whole thing again, so instead I'm just saying good night, gentlemen.
Good night.
Everyone have a happy Sabbath.
Birch, though she's doing better, but remember
Carolyn Birch, yes, she's doing better, that's positive. And then the man that John Mitchell was talking about, that was miraculous. Obviously, you just don't get off kidney dialysis that easy, that fast. So That's all beautiful. So I would just say again, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, and remember, always seek the kingdom first, gentlemen. We'll see you all next Sabbath.